room service. If I like, I order twice. Hibachi, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico.
Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, and I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm a little out of place. I'm recording from a hotel tonight, but that's okay. We're still going to have a great show, going to have a lot of fun. I've got a special guest to break down all things Pittsburgh Steelers, to chat it up about just all the things that are going on in Steelers Nation, Steelers country right now. And it's none other than Jack Sperry. Jack, I'm so glad, man, that you can join me tonight. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, I'm doing great. This should be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolutely. All right. So, man, we're hoping to get a lot of questions in. So if you're listening and tuning in and you have a question for Jack, go ahead and pop those questions in the chat and we'll get to those. But, man, Jack, I got to say from the start that, you know, the Pittsburgh Steelers have come out, they're 4-2, and now there's a bunch of changes happening, and some are good and some are up in the air. What's going on here with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I just want to get your thoughts real quick before we dive into the overall changes that have been going on going into this week. How do you feel about the Pittsburgh Steelers season so far? And, you know, anything they're doing well, anything they need to improve on? What are you thinking right now about this 4-2 start?
So obviously, you know, whenever you start season 4-2, you're feeling pretty good. You know, you're a couple games above the 500 mark. And obviously you got 2 home games coming up here against, I would say, 2 relatively beatable opponents. I'd say more the Giants and the Jets coming up here. But you also look at a couple of these games, the 2 games that you lost, and you're like, man, probably could have won those football games. The Indianapolis Colts, not the best team in the world, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And then the Dallas Cowboys, they were so banged up, and you're at home, you know, that those 2 games just feel like games you probably should have won. So, you know, you're sitting at a spot in 4-2, you're feeling pretty good, but also at the same time, you're kind of feeling, you know, maybe we should be 6-0. And, you know, maybe that's us being a little bit greedy, you know, wanting to have that perfect record. But you look at the teams that the Steelers have played right now, and you can kind of look at it and say, you know, it's been a relatively easy schedule to this point. So I do think 4-2 is a good spot to be in, but obviously there's things that need to be improved. It's nice to see that Alex Highsmith looks like he's going to be back this week. Defense should be continuing to play as well as they have been playing. And it seems like the Steelers are looking to maybe make a little bit of improvement in the passing game by making a switch to Russell Wilson. Will that happen? I guess we'll have to see over these next several weeks, but it's certainly going to be interesting to watch.
It really is. And, you know, we talked all offseason how with this schedule, you're going to have to start pretty quick if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers to give yourself a shot down the stretch. And I know some of the teams that we thought were going to be difficult matchups in the second half of the season maybe don't look so daunting at this point. You talk about the Cleveland Browns, and I think we could even sit back and agree that the Eagles aren't all that we thought maybe they could be this year. And I know they're getting healthy on offense as well. A lot of teams dealing with injuries. But when we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers in the here and now, I think it's very intriguing that despite winning, despite being close in all 6 games, that Mike Tomlin feels comfortable with potentially making a switch at quarterback despite obviously winning ball games. And I think it just goes back to show that this is not an offense-led team. Mike Tomlin is very comfortable with his defense. I think he believes he's got a championship caliber defense. And I think he just wants the offense to be as efficient as possible to let those guys do what they need to do to win football games. I'd like your take on that. And then let's just jump into the conversation about the quarterbacks. And is this the right move to potentially go to Russell Wilson here ahead of week 7?
Mike is certainly somebody that's defensive minded. He's always been that way. And, you know, it is kind of interesting that he inherited Ben Roethlisberger. So outside of that, he hasn't really developed, or he hasn't had the task of developing a quarterback like a Justin Fields, like a Kenny Pickett, and he hasn't necessarily gotten to that point where he's taken somebody that was like a ball of clay and then turned them into something truly special, at least not yet. So I think that the Russell Wilson discussion is very interesting because I think Mike Tomlin sees Russ as like that seasoned, experienced veteran that the moment's not going to be too big for him if and when this team makes the playoffs. You know, with Justin Fields, if he makes the postseason, it's going to be his first playoff experience. And if you just look at NFL history, you know, quarterbacks in their first playoff action, they rarely win, and they rarely win Super Bowls. All right. The record is absolutely atrocious for first time playoff quarterbacks. And then on the other side of that, Fields, especially these last 2 weeks, just hasn't been efficient enough as a passer where the team is good enough to win with the passing attack on offense. And, you know, once you get into the postseason, you're playing teams like the Bills and the Chiefs and the Ravens and all these teams that can put up all these points. You need to be able to match that. All right. You can't just rely on having this world-class defense every single week in the postseason and expect to win a Super Bowl. So I think that Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and everybody in that building is looking at the quarterback situation and saying, we've got somebody in here that, you know, we're hoping can be a little bit more efficient in the passing game. He brings experience to the table, so hopefully the moment's not too big for him in the postseason, and hopefully he can be efficient enough where the defense, the run game, and then the added element of an efficient passing game is going to be able to be enough to win a playoff game and hopefully win multiple playoff games come January.
I agree with your take. I think it's all about mindset when you're talking about why you make this decision in the first place. And I've said on several shows now that I think, you know, Mike Tomlin views his team as a group that can compete. And while some of us might sit back and say, that's a little bit of a stretch. You don't have a lot of weapons on offense. You've got injuries along the offensive line that have slowed you down a little bit in the development there. The reality is this defense, a lot of us thought this could be the league's best defense going into 2024. And I mean, when they're healthy, they've lived up to that billing. So I think you can see kind of the dichotomy of responses here is based on your perspective of the team. And so if you're future minded, I think you want to see Justin Fields out on the field. And if you're 2024, let's win now minded, I think Russell Wilson makes a lot of sense. And let's be honest about this too. Justin Fields did not take the starting job by the reins and run away with it in his play. I think, you know, the rushing ability is obviously it's stark contrast from what Russell Wilson can give you. And it's an absolute X factor, as Mike Tomlin put it in his press conference this last week. However, as a passer, it was underwhelming. There were a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of turned down throws. And even though he makes flashy plays every now and then out the pocket, scrambling, you just want to see more of the timing and rhythm passing game actually work. And I think we're seeing guys get open enough to where it should be there for Justin Fields, but some of the time he's turning those down or holding the ball and waiting for something bigger to develop. And it's just kind of become a frustration, I think, on the part of maybe the offensive coordinator, definitely on Mike Tomlin, I think a little bit here. And I think you can see that in how he described the play of Justin Fields as he's been really good, but not to be confused with great. And I think Mike Tomlin wants to see if there's another level this offense can get to. Do you kind of agree with that take or have a different opinion?
Yeah, 100%. You know, I think, you know, to have an honest discussion, even the people that want to go to Russ or think it's a good idea to go to Russ have to acknowledge that, you know, you will be missing a little bit of the bail the offense out with the legs kind of thing that Justin Fields has done at least 3 or 4 times in every game to this point. Now, the Steelers are hoping that, you know, Russ makes up for that by hitting some guys that are open down the field in structure more than Fields is doing right now. Like my big talking point right now, the thing that I'm trying to get across to so many Steelers fans is Calvin Austin III is open all the time, and Fields does not hit him ever, or I can't say ever. He's hit him on a couple. He hit him on a couple nice ones against Vegas. He had a couple nice ones against Los Angeles. But you talk about the turn downs. It seems like every single time it's a turn down, it's Calvin Austin III, and he's open. And it infuriates me because CA3 has put in so much time to give himself a chance to be a legitimate piece in a wide receiver room. And he's doing a good job giving his quarterback opportunities to give him the football. And it's just, you know, watching the tape every week of Fields missing, you know, open reads to him specifically has me pretty frustrated because I'm a pretty big fan of 19s. But you know, at the end of the day, I do think Russell Wilson provides a little bit more in structure decision making and vision. I also think another thing that goes unnoticed and untalked about is, I keep hearing, oh, Russell Wilson isn't going to survive behind this offensive line. That's a talking point that's used by quite a few on Steelers Twitter. But from my point of view here, the offensive line has actually played pretty decently in pass protection to this point. Now we'll see if Ryan McCollum can hold up. Coming in for Zach Frazier, who's going to be missing the next couple of weeks, and Broderick Jones has legitimately been terrible. But Russell Wilson's his calling card throughout his career has been his pocket presence, like his ability to field pressure, move around in the pocket, find those extra pockets of space, and buy that little bit of extra time is something he actually does really well. That's not a strength of Justin Fields' game. Justin kind of sits back there, and if he gets out of the pocket, he's great. But we see the great quarterbacks in the league today, Mahomes, Brady, somebody back in the day, obviously, but the guys that really get the job done, Aaron Rodgers, Josh Allen nowadays, they're so good at feeling pressure and just kind of doing those little shifts in the pocket, the step ups, the side to side movements to just buy a little bit of time. Fields doesn't really do that, and he holds on to the ball for a very long portion of time. Now, both of these quarterbacks do that. Russ likes to really hunt for the big play. Their average time to throw for Russ last year and Fields' this year is pretty much identical. So they're going to be holding onto the ball for generally the same amount of time. But I do think Russ has better downfield vision than Fields has demonstrated this year. And I think he can buy a little bit more time and create some passing lanes for himself with the pocket presence that he has.
Yeah, I don't see Russell Wilson turning down some of the wide open throws that we've seen Fields turn down. And that's just where it gets mind boggling, because you see all this talent, and with Fields, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this too, but it feels like when he starts scrambling and he's not thinking anymore, he's just like reacting. That's when you get the best of Justin Fields. I think he's thinking too much back there in the pocket. And I don't know if that's ever going to be an area where he can really improve to the level of I am a pocket passer who can also break out the big plays with my legs at times. And while Russell Wilson is diminished from his glory days, his elite days, where this is a player on track for the Hall of Fame, I think that he still has enough in him to be able to do, like you're saying, extend the play just a little bit to where you can hit that guy who's coming open across the middle of the field on the crosser, to where the open play, part of the design, the open player that is maybe 2 or 3 down the progression line, and you can actually hit that guy. And it's not just, okay, now we're moving outside the pocket and we're going to run, we're going to take off. And while that is a plus of what Justin Fields can bring, and we've seen plays Justin Fields makes that Russell Wilson absolutely is not going to make. So
can I actually jump in here real quick about Fields' rushing ability? I think even if you do go to rush, you can't take Fields out of the offense entirely. I think with short yardage, 3rd and 4th and short, also low red zone. He has 5 rushing touchdowns this year because he is such a weapon in the low red zone. And then also, I would even argue 4-minute drill. If the defense knows you're going to be running the football, trying to kill clock, I think that it makes sense to put Fields in there just to make sure that they're accounting for another person and another rushing threat, because Russ is just not going to be doing anything in the design quarterback run game like Fields potentially could. So even though I think that, on a down-to-down basis, Russ could be the better and more efficient passer, that doesn't mean that you just completely forget about Justin Fields and you leave that dynamic of a rushing threat on the sideline the entire game. So you can continue your point, but I just think that was an important point to make.
No, I 100% agree with that. And he's got to remain at least part of the offense in that regard, because it's such a dynamic piece of what the Steelers want to do. And we know they want to run the football. We know they want to lead with that. They want to be a possession offense. And, and maybe part of this whole thing is that they think Russell Wilson, by hitting some of those open guys, can keep the offense on schedule a little bit better, can keep them on the field a little bit longer, and keep the defense off. So that way they're maximizing their efficiency on both sides of the ball in that regard. So, but yeah, going back to just, the decision there, it makes sense to me that if you're addressing the quarterback situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that, this is just as good a time as any to give Russell Wilson a try now that he's healthy. you do have a couple weeks here and then you have a bye week, right? If things are absolutely terrible with Russell Wilson, you've got a bye week, you've got a guy you can go back to. And I know that that's not ideal, right? That's not how you would draw it up necessarily, but the injury to Russell Wilson changed the ball game a little bit. And there has to be a little bit of reworking of how your plan was going to be with those guys. Is there a scenario though, Jack, that you could see the Steelers going back to Fields full time this season, even if they begin with Russ as the starter moving forward?
No question. I mean, plain and simple, you're going to put the guy in there that gives you the best chance to win. If Russ goes in there, and all the Fields people, the predictions are right that Russ can't throw, and that he's just so bad, and he takes a million sacks because this offensive line is so bad. Like all the talking points, if all those things come true, then yeah, I mean, if it's really bad these next 2 weeks, and you're sitting at 4-4. 0-2 with Russ and 4-2 with Fields. I mean, going into the bye, it's going to be pretty hard to convince that locker room that we're going to keep going with 3.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that's going to happen. I think Russ is going to play fine, and barring injury, that's another thing we need to talk about, because he's already had 2 flare-ups with that calf. So that's always going to be something that is kind of going to be in the back of my mind watching him play. Is will that calf eventually get re-aggravated?
Yeah.
That's certainly a possibility. But if he stays healthy, I think that, based on what I've seen from his film from last year, which was a lot better than 2022 in the Nathaniel Hackett offense. And, another thing that I keep hearing is, how is Russ going to be able to survive, not only with the offensive line, which is something we've talked about, but also with the lack of weapons apparently here in Pittsburgh. Now, listen, obviously Pittsburgh needs another weapon. Okay, I think they need another receiver before the deadline. I think we all agree on that. But people talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers' offensive weapons as if there's literally nobody for Fields to throw to. But, I know George Pickens has had a little bit of a drop issue, but we all know how talented GP is. To say that he's a nobody, I think, is ridiculous. Van Jefferson has been legitimately terrible. Okay, that is the one gripe that you can say has just been a complete nothing. Doesn't separate on film. He's not even a very good run blocker. I don't even know why he's on the field. You got to replace him with whoever you trade for. But then Calvin Austin III getting open quite frequently, as we've discussed. Pat Freiermuth is still getting open as a short and intermediate threat, especially on weighty downs, as Mike Tomlin likes to say, on third downs. Like, he's your stick guy, right? He lines up in the slot or whatever, and he's running the stick route past the sticks, and he's been open pretty consistently there. And then not only that, but you got 2 really reliable receiving running backs in Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. So, people talk about the weapons here in Pittsburgh. Like, there's literally no one to throw to, and Fields is just absolutely effed, every time he goes out there, and there's just nobody open. But it's just not true based on what I've seen on film. Where was I going before that? I kind of forgot.
I couldn't tell you, honestly. I was looking through some of the comments and trying to
either, but plain and simply, I just think that Russell Wilson's going to be able to provide some efficiency that's been missing, especially with the Steelers trying to be in a methodical type offense. Pick up third downs, wear down an opposing defense, dominate the time of possession. You got to be able to hit those third and mediums, those third and manageables, and Fields has really struggled with that, especially these last 2 weeks. I think that this is probably the right decision.
Last question on the quarterback topic before we switch to a little bit more team-centric and some other topics about this game specifically. We're going to go to a break here real quick as well. But if you've seen Justin Fields now for 6 weeks, if he doesn't play another snap this year, is this a guy that you would want to be on the roster in Pittsburgh next year?
At the right price, absolutely. I mean, I think that if you have a backup quarterback like that, or even if they plan to start him next year, has he done enough for me to feel comfortable giving him a large contract and making him the full-time starter with no competition? No, he has not, especially as a passer. But, as a backup quarterback, he's 4-2 as the backup. All right, let's give him his flowers. Let's give him his credit. I think that he's done pretty much as good as you can ask any backup quarterback in the league to do in terms of the results that he has been able to deliver. So absolutely, I'd want him back as a backup. But if there's a team out there that's willing to take a shot on him, and give him a chance to start, I think he'd probably take that over coming back to Pittsburgh. He likes it here. He likes the
Yeah.
coaching staff. You know, he really likes Mike Tomlin. So if he doesn't get an opportunity to start anywhere, I think he would absolutely come back on another short-term deal to be the backup. But right now, if Justin Fields has played his last snap in 2024 as the starting quarterback of this team, I can't say I'm overly confident in giving him a large contract to make him the team starter moving forward.
I agree. I don't think he's shown enough to be in consideration without competition, like you said, as the future of the quarterback position for the Steelers. So if they do bring him back, it would have to be under the premise that you're going to have to compete with somebody, whether that's a rookie, whether that's another veteran, something along those lines.
Same old dance again.
Yeah. And I mean, we've been so blessed as a fan base watching Ben Roethlisberger for the last 18 years before his final run in Pittsburgh in 2021, and you realize what quarterback hell looks like, and you don't want to be there anymore. It's crazy. Just seeing how it just rotates off or on and off, and the circle just keeps going back and forth until you find the guy. Man, I really hope the Steelers can find the guy and find him quick. And I'm not giving up on Justin Fields yet, but there are definitely some concerns as to whether this is the ceiling that we see. Dynamic athlete, can get out in space.
I mean, it is year 4, man. It is year 4. I mean, all we hear from like guys like Louis Riddick on ESPN all this offseason was Arthur Smith was going to fix Justin Fields' mental processing issues, and he was going to do for him what he did for Ryan Tannehill. And it just unfortunately, and if the tape was saying something different, I would say it, because I've been a big Justin Fields fan. I even ranked him above Trevor Lawrence on my big board in that year's draft class. I love Justin Fields coming out, and I still love him as a guy and as a player, and his skill set's awesome. But as an objective person that watches film and understands what bad timing looks like and what bad pocket presence looks like, he certainly has displayed that, and it hasn't gotten much better from his previous years in Chicago. So maybe this is here in year 4 what he is, and if that is what he is, he's a backup quarterback.
Can't make a guy throw the ball, right? Give him open receivers, can't make him throw it. So we'll see how that all plays out, and so much left to play out in Pittsburgh over the course of this season. The season is still young, and lots to come in 2020. So stick around. We're going to take a quick break on the audio side. If you're listening live, we're not going anywhere. Just going to take a quick pause for some ads. And welcome back to the Steelers Q&A. Jeremy Betts and special guest Jack Sperry. Jack, it's been fun talking quarterback so far, but let's talk a little bit about Steelers versus Jets here, and then we'll get to some questions from the listeners. The more things change, the more they stay the same. You've got Davante Adams rejoining Aaron Rodgers now in a Jets uniform, not a Packers uniform. And this is a team sitting at 2-4 that has not had the start that they wanted. And especially a loss against a division rival last week. You got to think they're coming out hot this week, that they want to right the ship. Rodgers obviously has to be feeling good, getting his buddy back in town. Jeff Ulbrich and the offensive coordinator is escaping. Todd Downing, exactly. They've got another week to get things rolling together as a duo there leading this team. How do you feel about this game coming up, and any specific storylines you're watching?
Well, obviously, Russell Wilson's going to be a big X factor for this game. Is he ready to go? He really hasn't gotten a ton of snaps, either in training camp or during the season with the first team offense. Like Fields has really gotten all of that time with the first team offense. So there might be some rust. There might be some growing pains as Russ gets acclimated back here 7 weeks into the season. But also something I'm going to be watching out for quite a bit here is I think that this is going to be a tough win for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the reason I say that is even though the Jets are 2-4, they are definitely a desperate football team. And now they got the wind at their back because now they got Davante Adams in there. And, the thing about Aaron Rodgers is he's very, very reliant on chemistry and trust with receivers. It's why younger receivers, like rookie receivers, don't really work well with him. And it's why new receivers to his teams don't work well with him either. He needs time to develop the trust with players. Even Davante in his early years wasn't getting the ball all that much from Rodgers because he didn't have his trust. But once he developed that over a couple seasons, Randall Cobb, Jordy Nelson, these guys that can develop that language with Rodgers can really get it going. So that's kind of the reason why I think Rodgers has kind of gotten off to a slow start in New York, because everybody's new there, right? He missed an entire season last year. It's his first year with Garrett Wilson. It's his first year with Mike Williams. Allen Lazard has come up to be arguably like their most reliable target because he does have that language and that trust with Aaron Rodgers. So, you look at a guy like Rodgers, I still think he has great pocket presence, all-time great pocket presence. The arm strength is still there. The elasticity of his arm is still there. It just gets out so quick. He just does such a good job of reading the defense pre and post snap. He is still a top 10 quarterback in the league, in my opinion. But his offense really does rely on, being on the same page with him. And just nobody to this point has been on the same page with him. So I think this is a team that's going to get better as the season goes on. And now that they add Davante Adams into the mix, we know how legendary their connection is. Will it be like as fine-tuned immediately? Especially just 1 week in the building for Adams. I guess we'll have to see on Sunday. Joey Porter Jr. will probably be shadowing him. And we know how he can shut down opposing ones. But it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup here. I think that right now I'd probably have to pick the Jets to win the football game, just because I'm not too sure how Russ is going to play coming off that injury, first game of the season. And I feel like the Jets are desperate with the wind at their back.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I don't think this is a great spot for Pittsburgh. Like, I wouldn't say that the Jets are far and away a better team than Pittsburgh, and their record kind of indicates that they've had some struggles, right? But one of the questions in here I wanted to pop up is what do you think from Afton Fora? What do you think of the Jets having a worse record and being favored in Pittsburgh? There's just so much uncertainty, like you mentioned, about the quarterback situation, and now you add in a guy like Davante Adams who. Yeah, the dude's 31, but he's still playing like a top flight receiver.
He's still a top 5 receiver in the game, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I agree. And even if he's lost a quarter of a step, just mentally, physically, the way he knows offense, the way he runs routes, the way he catches the football. I mean, it's just impressive all the way around. So even if he doesn't have, and he was never known as a speed receiver anyway. So exactly. I don't think that's what you're asking out of this guy. But are those the factors, though, to you that add into why the Jets on the road are favored? And then what do you think about Mike Tomlin being a home dog? That usually goes well for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, it usually does. Mike's usually the type where if they're heavily favored to win a game at home, that's when you're in trouble. Exactly. But like I said, there's just so many question marks, so many unknowns heading into this game, which is why I'm so excited to watch it. By the way, we're going to be doing a live watch party on my channel, Steelers Talk by Chat Sports, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern. So if any of your guys want to come hang out with me and my producer Coop, we're going to be doing an hour-and-a-half tailgate, live play-by-play for the entire game, and then extensive post-game. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be a really, really interesting game, Jeremy, just because of the unknowns. I'm really excited to see how it unfolds.
I am too. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to is, you mentioned it earlier on in the show, is the return potentially of Alex Highsmith. And one of the things that, as good as TJ Watt has been, and I mean, what can you ask out of a guy more than what he's been providing the last few weeks, even without a lot of the help that he's usually used to on the opposite edge. But getting somebody who's a real threat on the opposite edge from TJ Watt, that only helps this front seven. It only helps this pass rush. And if Highsmith is truly fully healthy, when I expect him to be on the field, the way they've been talking, the way his ramp up has been going, that's going to be huge for a team that is still led by this defense and by this front seven. I think if there's any place where the Steelers match up well, it's this pass rush against an offensive line in New York that has some holes and some inconsistencies. How do you see the pass rush affecting the game for Pittsburgh this week?
I think this has to be a TJ Watt game. Morgan Moses has been consistently their worst pass protector so far this season. So TJ obviously lines up against the right tackle. So I do expect, obviously, the chips are going to be, galore, as they always are against TJ Watt. But to me right now, TJ is the defensive player of the year, especially after that performance last week where he completely wrecked the game with those 2 forced fumbles.
Yeah.
But Highsmith's going to be big too. Tyron Smith hasn't had quite as good of a year as a pass protector as he's had. I actually kind of like the interior of the Jets O-line. Actually, they're grading quite well right
Yeah.
now. Joe Tippmann, their young center, is playing good football right now. So I think that it's gonna be such a fun matchup, man, because it
Yeah.
is a good offensive line. You got Vera Tucker in there, John Simpson's playing good as well, but you also have Cam Hayward, who is just
Yes.
he's playing at a first team All Pro caliber level.
Yeah.
He has been such,
Crazy.
people talk about Watt, but Hayward has been just as good, man. He has been just an absolute beast. He was just going to work against Las Vegas last week
Yeah.
on film. It was so much fun to watch. Then, of course, the linebackers have played pretty well as well in terms of run defense. I keep hearing on Steelers Twitter, like, the Steelers run defense stinks. They're second in the league in yards per carry allowed right now. Like the run defense has been really good. They were pretty bad at the end of the game against Dallas because they were gassed and they had so many injuries that they just had to play guys constantly. Plus, the defense was always on the field. But other than that, like, the run defense has been really, really good. So I actually think this matchup between the Jets run offense and the Steelers run defense is going to be super fun. Breece Hall is a super dynamic talent. But as we know, man, this Steelers defense doesn't bend.
That is true. And they've been much better this year too about giving up fewer yards and not just being a good red zone defense and a good scoring defense, but actually shutting down teams for long stretches of games. And they still have a propensity, and it's going to happen at some point in every game against any defense, really, where the opposing offense gets a play or two plays in a game where there's a big play or a drive down the field.
First drive of the game has been an issue at times.
Yeah.
Colts game.
I agree.
Raiders game, Cowboys game, first drive, or Falcons game. All those games, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Broncos game, did they have a decent drive on there? I can't remember exactly, but there's been some good first drives on the script from opposing defenses. And the reason why that is because the Steelers defense is pretty predictable in terms of the scheme that they run. Tomlin has run the same defense. They've run cover 3 on first down. They'll even go to it on second down if you get a decent gain, but then they'll go to Tampa 2 and second and medium, second and long, and then they'll throw their blitz stuff on third downs. Like, it's pretty easy to game plan for. It's more difficult when you have to come up with a game plan off of this script. So I think that's why the Steelers defense has been worse on those first and second drives this year.
Yeah.
But overall, like you said, they've been pretty darn excellent.
Yeah, and talking about that specifically, I think as this defense warms up, they just have the players that can just wear you out on an offense. So they end up winning on talent more so than scheme a lot of times. So it is something to watch, though, where you talk about an offense getting in rhythm early. You can't let them stay in that rhythm, and I think that's where the Steelers have made good adjustments coming back and kind of holding opponents down, and that's why the second half scoring has been so low for a lot of these teams. The Steelers make good adjustments in a lot of those regards, and it's like you said, it's been fun to watch this defense this year, but I'm excited to see what they can do. This is a good question from Dennis Povlak, the quad father, we call him here over on the Steel Curtain Network, always in the chats. If we play zone against Rodgers and don't blitz, we could have problems. What's your opinion? Jack, what do you think about this? Rodgers obviously known to pick apart zone defenses, to read things pre-snap. You got to mix things up against this guy, right?
Well, Steelers are going to play their zone coverage. They're going to do what they do.
Sure.
What I really think this defense is at its best, though, is when they put Joey on an island in press, and then they shift the defense to the other side. And that's really where Dante on the other side really plays his best, because you can play off coverage. In that scenario, you shift the defense to the rest of the formation, especially if you get the number one receiver alone on one side. You can kind of shift coverage pretty much all to one side of the defense, and that can shrink throwing windows for the quarterback. I think this defense plays best when they do that. But I think that the key here, Dennis, is to get pressure on Rodgers. All right, whether it's zone, whether it's man, you got to get to him, and you got to get it to him relatively quickly. That's why I said I think this has to be a TJ Watt game. He has a favorable matchup against Morgan Moses. Last week, the Buffalo Bills, they have a terrible run defense, but they've got a really good pass rush, and they got after Rodgers. All right, and you saw the result. Like, the offense was definitely stymied. So if Watt, Highsmith, Hayward, Benton, Ogunjobi, those guys get the job done and the pass rush is solid, I think that's the best way and the most reliable way to pick apart Rodgers, because even if you go man, he's gonna find ways to beat that too.
Yeah, I just think he's so good pre-snap. You have to be able to disguise things a little bit better than what the Steelers do typically. And I just don't know if they're going to make that adjustment necessarily. That's part of why the presence of Rodgers makes me nervous about this game and why I have picked
Yes.
against the Steelers this week in that regard. So tough spot for Pittsburgh. But
It's another reason why I'm not picking the Steelers to win this football game.
right, yeah, they struggled against Dak, right, because of what he does pre-snap, I think, in a lot of regards. And the Cowboys asked Dak Prescott to do more pre-snap than almost any team in the league. Rodgers does it by himself, right? He's kind of out there, gets the play call, and he'll make his own adjustments.
Yeah, I mean, he's the
coach on the
classic
field.
Brady Manning. He goes
Yeah.
out there, sees what the defense is giving him, and then, and this is my favorite type of quarterback, by the way. Nowadays, you go out there and you had the play call, and this is something that frustrates me about Justin a little bit.
Yeah.
Not to get back to the quarterback situation,
Sure.
but it's like I don't know if Art just doesn't give him the ability to check, which I don't think is the case because we've seen him make checks. But it's sometimes it's like that play is terrible against the coverage. They're not disguising it. Why didn't you check it? Why are we calling this play if we know it's not going to work against this coverage? But Rodgers is just so good at going out there. He's seen every coverage in the book. And he's just like, all right, here's how we're going to beat this right now. And it's just so hard to beat if you don't have a pass rush on him.
Got to get that pass rush going for sure. Final question for you, Jack. It's a fun one from Afton. I guess I don't know about the jelly bean thing, but I got to hear about this. What's the worst jelly bean you've eaten on your show?
So we don't really do the jelly beans anymore, but we used to do the Bean Boozled jelly beans for like $10 super chats.
Nice.
And it was just, the worst one I've ever eaten was Old Bandage from the Bean Boozled.
Oh.
But another one that's really bad is we actually got the hot ones, the hot jelly beans.
Yeah.
And they had Carolina Reaper ones, and Jelly Belly claims it's the hottest jelly bean in the world, and boy, oh boy, was it hot, man. And we had to eat a couple of them on one show. It was torture.
Was it worth it though in the end?
For a $10, I can't say it was. I can't say it was. No, it wasn't.
Yeah, I can imagine that for sure. Man, it's been fun to have you on. It's been fun to talk with you about the Steelers. I think, the listeners, you guys had some good questions. We talked about the offensive line. I'll bring this up just because it was asked here, Valley Ford. How's the Jets offensive line playing? They any good? I think you were spot on. The interior is pretty good. The tackles have struggled at times, especially Morgan Moses. And that's why you got to have this pass rush this week. I'm a big Elijah Vera Tucker fan. I have been since he came out in the draft, and I think he plays really well. He's very versatile, and I think he's one of the smartest players in the league at that position as well. Really can sense the pressures and stunts and things like that and make up for some of the issues beside him a little bit, but you got to come screaming off the edge this week. And any other areas, just real quick, I guess, that you think the Steelers might be able to take advantage of the Jets?
So their pass rush isn't very good.
Yeah.
That's the one thing about their defense. Their defense is still very good, still very well coached. They're great on the back end. Their safeties and corners, very, very good. Sauce and DJ Reed are two of the best cornerback duo in football right now. So if there's any week where the receivers aren't going to get open for the quarterback, it's actually going to be this week. So maybe if you do want a rushing quarterback, maybe this is a week where you want to start Fields just because, these guys might not be getting open. Sauce will probably be shading or covering Pickens everywhere he goes. I would expect DJ Reed would be either on Van or Calvin. If I were them, I'd be guarding Calvin because Van can't get open against anybody.
Yeah.
So if that's the case and they're guarding Calvin, it's going to be tough, man. I think this might have to be a Pat Freiermuth game. It might have to be a heavy run kind of game. Now the Jets' run defense is okay. It's about league average, but Najee Harris is coming off the best game of his NFL career last week over, I think 7.5 yards per carry last week or something like that, something crazy. And we've seen the agility and the light feet from him last week that we've never seen from him before.
Right.
He's been a little bit more lumbering as a power back throughout his career, but last week he was a legit star caliber running back. So hopefully we get that Najee Harris instead of the regress towards the mean. So I actually think Najee Harris is quite a big X factor in this football game, because I think there's going to be lots of opportunities for checkdowns. Russ really likes to lean on his checkdowns. If you watched any of his tape from Denver, you know that he checks the ball down if there's nothing there all the time. So I expect Najee to have a big game, both as a pass catcher and as a runner. And if the Steelers are going to win, it's going to be Najee Harris once again taking over offensively.
Yeah, I like that call on using the running backs in the passing game to try to loosen things up maybe down the field. So good stuff, Jack. Why don't you go ahead and plug anything that you've got coming up again, and we'll get out of here.
Yeah, so you guys can follow me at Jack_Sperry on Twitter. I put out my film analysis on there every single week. So if you guys want extensive, I usually focus in on the quarterbacks because that's usually what people want to see. But if you guys want Steelers news, my instant reactions to all of that, the latest trade rumors surrounding the wide receiver position, you guys can follow me at Jack_Sperry. And then I'm also the host of Steelers Talk by Chat Sports. We are currently the largest individually run Steelers news channel on YouTube. So if you guys want to give us a subscribe, we put out free Steelers content every single day. Tomorrow, I'm actually putting out, I think, the most in-depth video we have ever put out on the channel. It is a full deep dive of the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh, why I think Russell Wilson is the right fit at this point, and the right call at this point. We go over every single talking point about Justin Fields and Russell Wilson and the wide receiver position and the offensive line position and how it all fits together. It's like a 25-minute video. If you're curious about this quarterback situation, this football team, I highly recommend you check out our video. It comes out tomorrow morning.
Knowing your stuff, that's going to be a must watch. Give him a follow, give him a subscribe on YouTube. Great stuff as always from Jack Sperry. Jack, we'll have to do this again sometime. I appreciate you coming on the show. Have a great one. And all of you listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We will talk to you next time here on the Steelers Q&A podcast.